Hello, how are you today? I hope you're doing well. I want to say thanks so much for, coming back to the channel, or welcome if this is your first time um, on the channel. I want to thank you for in advance, or thank you, period, for how you engage with this channel. Whether it's, subscribing, please subscribe. Whether it's commenting, asking questions, liking, sharing the video, or simply viewing the video. I do appreciate you being here today. So I appreciate all the support you give, because once again, I do this in hopes that not only sharing my testimony will be of help to someone that may have gone on the same journey, in the same journey, but it will be an encouragement for people to, get checked out and, try to live a very healthy life. So, as usual, I always let you know my full disclaimer is in the description, but I am not a medical doctor. So, today, I want to share with you my experience about having the final biopsy of 2025, the final biopsy of 2025, and the experience in my doctor's office. So, as you remember, the last video regarding the uterine health journey is that I'm taking progesterone. That's what the doctor described. And this was around September. And we had already scheduled for me to have my next biopsy in December. One second. Sorry, I had to sneeze and I don't want to sneeze in front of you. So, anyway, so the next so we had already scheduled for me to have a biopsy in December. So that would be my final biopsy of 2025. And again, that is why I call it my 2025 uterine health journey, because if you've been with me all this time, you know that I started seeing the spotting of blood January 2025. So now we're having my final biopsy December 2025. So it's really a year journey, but I'm still on the journey, ladies and gentlemen. So my biopsy was scheduled for Tuesday, December 9th. And so I got a call the day of the appointment saying that my doctor had an emergency and I would need to reschedule. And I was totally, okay with that, totally flexible, because it could have been an emergency delivery or some other kind of emergency, medical emergency she had to attend to. And she's also a person. She may have had her own personal, emergency. So I was, I'm totally okay with stuff like that. And I just said, okay. I will admit that I was a little saddened, because my goal was to have my biopsy, that second week of December. And then I should have my results. And then I would know how I would be going into 2025, 2026, right? So then I would be a little more prepared of how I was going to go into 2026. And so I have this saying, it's going to sound weird, or maybe not, that your emergency can't be my emergency. Meaning that sometimes people do have real emergencies in life and you do have to drop whatever you're doing and you have to go help them. But sometimes you have to step back and prioritize your own self and seeing if that's an emergency for you, because sometimes it's not. And in this case, whatever my doctor had to attend to, that was the emergency for her. But it wasn't life-threatening or anything like that for me. So I still wanted to stick to my goal of having a biopsy in December, since we had set it up that way, and me having the results by the end of December. That's what I wanted, and that's what I thought I would do. So when they called and told me they had the emergency, my doctor had the emergency. I forgot who called, like her assistant or nurse or somebody said that they would call and try to give me an appointment for like the first week in January 2026. And I just said, okay. But then I thought about it again. Her emergency is not my emergency. I want to stick with being very, healthy, and on my journey of making myself a priority, because for so long, I've always shown up for everybody. I've always dropped everything and ran to other people and have always been there. And I have learned, you really learn this the older you get. Sometimes you just have to say, I'm important in this case. So I went through the portal and I requested if the doctor could recommend a colleague. because I've gone to other gynecologists before and doctors, and maybe they weren't available, but they said my colleague can do this, especially if it's something, I won't say something as simple as a biopsy, but I'm sure she wouldn't recommend me, someone fresh out of school. So she said that was feasible. And I said, great. So my appointment that got canceled was on that Tuesday of that week. And so she said her colleague had time on that Friday, which would have been December 12th. And I said, no problem, because I was really happy about that. So when she told me that I could get the new doctor, they told me the name. So of course I researched the doctor and see that she had over 20 years experience. I was like, wonderful. We're in business, right? Because my whole goal, again, is I wanted to get the biopsy so that I could know what, just to wrap the year up, what's going on. We're on this progesterone, what's happening here with the body. So, and I'm grateful that I hadn't really saw any blood or anything like that or bleeding this whole year, just in January. But you never know what's going on the inside of you. So when I get to the appointment, I have my notes. That's why I'm looking down, making sure I'm not missing any detail in this. So I get to the doctor's appointment, and the medical assistant comes and greets me, and do the normal thing. They take your blood pressure, and as she as she's taking my blood pressure after she finished that, she informs me that she'll be in the room with me with the doctor for the procedure. I was just like, that's odd, but okay, because I've never, as long as I've been going to a gynecologist, have never had a doctor have a medical assistant, a nurse, or anybody in the room with them. So I thought, that's odd. So, hey, let me know. Has anybody been in the room with you when you've gone to see your gynecologist? Maybe I've just been blessed to just be in the room with one person, or maybe every place has different procedures. So I don't know. All I know is that I was a bit nervous. It's a new doctor, and all I kept thinking about was the biopsy and the results. So any kind of other thing, I was not going to let it be a distraction. Maybe a normal time I'd have been like, I don't feel comfortable with you in here, because I don't know what the purpose would be for a medical assistant to be in the room while this type of exam procedure is going on. Okay, so I said, okay, whatever. So at this point, I said, okay, fine. I just wanted the procedure over and done with, right? So the doctor comes in, I meet the doctor. She was very nice. I could tell she's not really big on answering a lot of questions, but some questions I have for my doctor, she kind of, answered them, but they were very quickly. They weren't a lot of questions, maybe 2 or 3 questions I had, and they were very few. So she did answer those questions. Then she also informs me that the medical assistant will be in the room with me. And at this point, I'm just like, okay, whatever. Let's just get this biopsy done, because I'm nervous and I just want to get the biopsy, get the results, see what's going to happen, what the results say. And so, I'm already dressed in the gown. And so, when you're in the doctor's office, your feet are placed in those stirrups, so, spread apart so they can get in there, and you're scooted all the way down to the edge. So, the doctor can have a good view of your vagina to be able to, perform the biopsy or any kind of gynecology exam. So the very first thing that she did, which I thought was interesting, was not the very first thing. Let me back up. So the medical assistant, let me give you a preview of them. So my feet are in the stirrups, right? And so the door's behind me. There's a couch in front of me, and then there's a long table along the side. And, where the doctors normally have their, table to write stuff. I'm thinking the medical assistant is going to be on the side taking notes. I don't know what the medical assistant is doing in there. No, the medical assistant, as the doctor is sitting down, and the doctor's, of course, I'm in the stirrup, so the doctor is looking straight into my vagina. The medical assistant is standing behind her, and she's also staring down my vagina. At this moment, I'm like, oh, what is going on? I've never had this experience, right? So I don't know. I'm not part of some kind of test or experiment. I'm not loosey-goosey. So I was just like, okay. So as I look at the medical assistant, and she's back there behind the doctor, and she's like this. I'm like, what? Have you not seen a vagina before? And I know that medical assistants don't really go to, unless I don't recall correctly, they do like the paperwork, your blood pressure or something like that. They don't really get involved in the anatomy as far as I know of the body. So she's making all his faces in the back, and I'm nervous. I'm having a biopsy. I'm like, what the crap is going on? I says, oh my goodness. So she's standing behind her to hand her the tools. So you know how the doctor sits and your feet are like in front of them. And so she's got to go like this, hand me the tool. I thought to myself, she could have been at the other end and not staring down my vagina, and she could still have handed her the tools. Whatever. So I put all that aside because, again, I wasn't going to let any distractions or anything kind of like take me out of my zone of just being calm, focused. Let's get this biopsy done. So the doctor inserts, I think it's called a spectrum. I think that's what it was. It's the tool that they insert into your vagina, and it opens up the vagina for them. And so she inserts that in. Fine. They do all this thing to make it larger so they can get in. She takes it out. What? I've never had that happen. Two things now that are happening that I've never had happen, right? First, the medical assistant standing behind her, looking down my vagina. Now she takes out this, and then she just, kind of puts it off to the side, and then she grabs another one and she puts that in. I'm not sure if she takes that one out or not because my eyes are closed and I'm just praying. Did I look up the right doctor? I said, sure, I looked up the right doctor. She got 20 years experience. I know I looked up the right doctor. I had to. So at this point, none of this is fun for me because, when they put that thing in, it's usually steel. Sometimes it could be plastic. That part is even uncomfortable, and whatever. If you've been there, you've been there, that part can be uncomfortable too. But, you go to your gynae every year, you kind of anticipate for it and you expect it, right? So, and I've had biopsies before, because remember, I've had them all year, and they can be painful. And I've shared with you, there can be a level of discomfort. Everybody's pain level, everybody's level of discomfort is very different. So some people can handle the pain, some people can't, whatever. So she begins the procedure of the biopsy, and that's when they take the little tool I explained, and they go further up, pass through your cervix, and they go into your uterus, and there's like a little tool, for lack of a better word, like, it kind of gathers and scrapes as much of the tissue there to be able to get a sample to test for the biopsy, right? And the doctor could tell I was in some level of discomfort, right? So I was like, oof, or something like that. I was like, you could just tell because it was so painful. And it was a different kind of pain that I hadn't experienced before. And I was like, ooh. And then she says, did you take your ibuprofen? And I'm thinking, what? I says, no, I didn't take any ibuprofen because no one told me to take ibuprofen before I come for a biopsy. So, free tip, check with your doctor first. Maybe take an ibuprofen before you come to have a biopsy. But I've never had anyone say that to me before. So maybe this is a pro tip. Maybe that's her practice. I don't know. I don't recall this level of pain in the very first biopsy I had meeting my original new gynecologist. So I don't know, but the comment I wrestle with sharing these parts of the details with you, but I've been very transparent. So I said, I got to be transparent about this too. I don't like to talk ill of anyone. I just didn't like her comment. I thought it was very condescending. It wasn't like, oh my goodness, you're in pain. Did you take it? It was like, didn't you take it was something like, your mother would tell you, didn't I tell you to do something? Did you not do it? And I'm thinking, whoa, where did this come from? But again, let's just get this biopsy because the biopsy doesn't take long. Let's just get this biopsy done so I can get out of here, right? I just want my results. That's all I want is my result. That's it. That's all I want. That's all I want. We don't have to be besties. But I thought that was condescending. So that's like number 3 for me, right? So, like I said, it was very painful and I was making some noises of discomfort. I'm not a big screamer like you probably see on videos of people having children and things like that, but I was like, oh, but it was like these sharp pains that I have never experienced before. And so I'm human. If you pinch me, I'm going to say, ouch. So I don't know. I was like, oh, And then she says to me, the doctor, well, don't you remember this pain from the last time? Excuse me? What? I've never had children, but I have seen women that maybe have misplaced their keys, their glasses, or whatever. But when any woman that's had more than one child, they can tell you instantly everything like it was yesterday. This child was 2 hours. I know no one's 2 hours, but this child was 12 hours and a lot of pain. This one was 7 and no pain. They can give you every detail about it. So one experience might be different from the other experience. So no, I don't remember this level of pain, doctor. And I'm like, in my mind, I was just so flabbergasted that, and it's the tone in which she said it. Like, I don't know, I don't keep a pain memory book. I know biopsies are very painful, but I don't keep a memory book of like what the pain should feel like. I just know it's painful, right? And I prepare myself for that. Clearly, I didn't prepare myself enough up to her standard. So I felt like, what am I, a failure here? What's going on? I thought she just was absolutely rude. And if this would have been anything else, I would have wanted to stop this whole thing. But you know what? You're in there, get everything you need. Like I've even told my other doctor, get everything you need so that we can have a good test result. And that works out for me. But I thought she was really, really rude. And I felt like my level of discomfort was maybe my fault. But I just said, let's just get this over with. Then, as she's wrapping up the procedure, she says, oh, I was only able to get a small sample, but they should be able to test it. So I felt, is this my fault? Because I was in discomfort. Maybe she didn't want to see me in any more discomfort, but I would rather she had a conversation. And I don't know if I said I'm sure, because after the biopsy, I was still feeling some level of the pains and the effect of her being inside, with the tool being inside my uterus. So I was just like, okay, she says, but they should be able to, she's a doctor. She's seen these things before. So she says that that's the right amount, although it's small, that they can still get something. No problem. Whatever. Then she places her hand in my vagina and she feels around, which is normal if you've ever gone to a gynecologist, because they're checking the status of your uterus or whatever. And sometimes they'll say, your uterus is high, your uterus to the left, to the right, or they'll give you something just on base with how they're feeling. Not her. She sticks her hand in my vagina, takes it back out. Oh, and while she's in my vagina, let me just tell you this. Then my bladder says, oh, we got to go to the bathroom. And I said, oh my God, I got to go to the bathroom. She says, don't worry. If she's feeling it all in there, she says, we have a pad. And I'm thinking, a pad? I drink a lot of water. I knew this was a river coming out. And so I tried to hold it as I could. But like I said, most doctors will tell you, something going on with your uterus. She did nothing. She just walked out the door after she finished. I felt violated. I'm going to be very honest. I was like, what the crap was that? Yeah. But I couldn't focus too much on it because I had to use the bathroom. So the medical assistant and her, they leave out. I just quickly dress, grab my purse, run to the bathroom, barely make it. It's so amazing how your uterus knows, or your kidney knows, when you're near a bathroom and just wants to. So sure enough, not to be graphic, but I have after everything else, I pee a river. Okay, I felt much better. Then I come back into the room and I freeze because there's my sample sitting on the ledge. I'm like, what? And I go over it and I look at it. It has my name on it, so it's mine. And it's just sitting there randomly. I thought, this is odd. Anytime I've had any kind of testing or blood work or whatever, they usually take it with them, or I've never seen it sitting around like that. I'm like, this could have been compromised. I said, am I being punked today? Is this real life? So I sat in there because I went back in there to get my coat. I sat in there because it's December, and so it's pretty cold outside. And so I sat there and waited for them to see who was coming to get this thing, my sample, that was painfully removed from me. And so the medical assistant comes back in the room, and I said, yeah, I was waiting to see. She said, oh yeah, I'm here to get it now. And I thought, okay. So that was a very interesting experience, to say the least, and a lot of red flags for me. My current doctor, to me, set the bar for this experience, this journey that I'm on. So anybody after her, I don't expect people to be her. I'm not that wackadoodle, but I expect some level of professionalism. And so I learned a very, very, very valuable lesson. Is this doctor qualified? I'm sure she is, or she wouldn't be working, right? Does she have a lot of years of experience? Sure, she does. Is she not? She a little gruff and rough? To me, that day, yes, she was. Would I want? Would I recommend her to anybody? No, especially not a woman for the first time. But who knows? She may be a great doctor to go to for your very first time, having your first gynae visit. But that biopsy experience with that particular doctor, that was horrible. And I did feel violated after she just placed her hand in my vagina and she just left. But all I kept thinking of was, I don't have to see her again ever, because if my doctor ever have another emergency and she brings up her name, I will say no. And at least we got to buy a sample so I can get some test results. So the end goal was that. Well, there's more to this story, but I think I'm going to end it here, because I think that's best for right now, just to end it here for right now. So I will come back with a part 2 and wrap up everything else that happened. So thanks so much, as usual. I can smile about it, but I'm not really smiling about it. I'm still very unhappy. I'm still very, yeah, I could tell you more in the next video, because I don't like to make long videos, but yeah. So you hear about those horror stories. It wasn't too bad of a horror story, but it was for me. Yeah. So anyway, I will, as you can see, I'm kind of reliving that moment. So I will finish this up in the next video. And again, I don't want to speak ill about anybody. I'm not trying to make this a negative video. I'm just trying to share my experience at the doctor's office for this biopsy. And this was not my regular doctor. This was a colleague of hers that she felt very capable, I'm sure, that could handle this procedure. So till next time, stay tuned for more. Have a great day.